All right, so this is watching the watchers. Like Patrick said, I do a lot of forensic analysis. So I deal with dead boxes. I'm not really doing it much at scale, doing a lot of the enterprise stuff, but I dig deep and I look for really obscure stuff. So if you went to the conference in November in Maui, one, it was fantastic. I love these conferences. It's been easily my favorite conference by far. I went through and talked about my Apollo tool, which went really in depth with iOS devices, literally everything that those things track, which is super creepy. That's what I do. I may be small and unassuming and very quiet, but when I get access to your data, I go nuts. Nobody gives me their computers and phones anymore, which is kind of strange. Don't know why. So contact information is up there. By far, most available on Twitter. Website is also there, Mac Forensics. The presentation will be uploaded to that a little bit later on. And for my class information, that is forensic518.com. So I do work two jobs. I do basically two jobs. I have a day job. I'm a government contractor for people and things, doing mobile device forensic analysis and research. Then my other job is teaching for SAMs, so it gets me out, gets me traveling, gets me to places like this. So I really do appreciate that. So this is kind of a presentation of digging into all these third-party monitoring utilities. So when I talked about the iOS stuff the last time, this is a lot of the stuff that's being tracked by the operating system itself. Sometimes that stuff breaks or it doesn't track what you want to track, and sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper, and third-party apps are sometimes missed for a lot of that same sort of information. So I'm going to go through some of that as we go along. Now, specifically, the applications that I'm going to talk about, of course, I'm going to hit the Objective-C stuff. Who uses Objective-C? Any of the tools? I'm not surprised that everybody in this room should be using those. Little Snitch. Okay. SoClose, or any AV. Let's just go with any AV for this one. All right. Who's going to admit it, right? And then iStat menus. Anybody? So I kind of give it a little variety here. I think this is a different room. We are security professionals in here, so we probably do have quite a bit of monitoring software. I know my mother is not going to have Objective-C and Little Snitch installed on her system. I kind of wish it would be, but I don't think she'd like the pop-ups so much. But I also threw in there things like, iStat and AV, which is a little bit more broad. Those might be pre-installed on some systems. iStat is a very popular kind of command center thing as well. So I want to kind of open it up just a little bit. Now, what I'm looking for with these particular applications is what is it logging? And sometimes it's logging in a plain text file, sometimes it's a gzip. Maybe it's logging into a database somewhere. So I'm looking into these files that it creates. Normally, I wouldn't call any of these things bugs. I'm just using them for forensic analysis and looking at what it's tracking. So sometimes it does it in its own application files, and sometimes it's just using the normal log service. We'll talk a lot about the system logs, specifically unified logs, to send a lot of those events to. Now, as far as investigative uses, we talk a lot about security today. I will, of course, be doing a lot of investigations into how a system got compromised. Was it an intrusion? Did the user click on something? Was something inserted into the system? So things like that, questions like that I need to answer, a lot of this stuff can help with that. But I'm also going from a different perspective, maybe more of a criminal investigation. What was the user doing? Were they in a particular location? Were they using a certain application? Something to that effect. So a couple of different things that I want to talk about there. And all the stuff that I'm going to be talking about is all on that right-hand side there. Everything from getting the user's location to what they're downloading, potentially what they're installing, what's running on the system, could all be used in a variety of different investigations. It's all a matter of what you are actually looking for. So let's start with the Objective-C tools. Might as well, as this is a conference that kind of all brought us here. So do not disturb. This is basically, keeping track of the evil maids in our world. So perfect to start with that, because most of us, I think, are staying at hotels right now. So I have this one running. So whenever my laptop lid gets opened up, it sends me a little alert. And I got the little alert that goes to my phone, it goes to my watch. I want to know when somebody's mucking around with my system. So I do like Objective-C. Appreciates to that. So first thing I might want to look at, if I know that this user has these tools on here, is it enabled or not? You know, you might have it installed, but it may not necessarily be enabled. So I'm going to just do a quick search. This is using the log command to look at the unified logs and looking for the event message contains DND or do not disturb. A lot of the times with the different applications, you can search for things like Objective-C, you can search for do not disturb, you can search for DND. Every application will track a little bit differently. So you just kind of have to get used to what you're looking for with that. So this one is just simply printing out, is it enabled? Is it not enabled? You know, that is the first start. If it's not tracking anything, see if it's not enabled, then it's probably not tracking much at all. Next thing is the laptop lid state. So I was doing a lot of this research on my own system, for better or for worse, more on that a little bit later. And I have the laptop. So whenever I open and close the laptop, each one of those events is going to be recorded. Now that's great, you might not care about that, but from an investigative standpoint, this tells me that the user might be sitting in front of that computer. I might be able to tell how long they were using that system for. Or do they, go to work, they open up their laptop the first time in the morning, 5 o'clock rolls around, it's time for happy hour, they close it down. So frequency of this could also be potentially useful in investigations. Was the system even up and running at a particular time? Next things are things like volumes or USBs that were connected to the device. Now, do not disturb is great for this for the first 3 minutes. And that's kind of one of the problems with DND. It's not a problem. I know, I get why it's I shouldn't say that. But forensically, it's a problem because it's not tracking every single USB that's being put into the device. So it's really tracking the first 3 minutes to see if anything is really being done onto the system. So in these logs that I'm showing you, you might have associations with volumes or mounted devices and things like that, and that's great. And that's something that we can use for, a weird malicious volume that might have been plugged into the system. We can take that volume name and pivot off of that and look for it in other p-lists, other system logs, try to figure out more about that particular device. So it is kind of a nice thing to do that. And also the timestamps are also going to be very important. So accuracy of timestamps is great, especially if you're trying to put a whole intrusion together onto the system. So in this one, I know it's a little bit difficult to see here, but we see next copy device. So this is actually my class USB for my SANS class. It's created by a company called NextCopy. So now I'm getting some kind of manufacturer type information too. If I go down here, you guys can see that, right? I see forensics FOR 518-A. This is a volume name. So I'll take this volume name and maybe do a keyword search across the whole system, see where else that pops up. Is it a one-time insertion? Or is this something that the user uses all the time, every single day that they use this particular device? Next thing, application usage in different processes. So this could be potentially useful in investigations where I want to know, is the user doing something or is the system doing something weird? So I want to know if there's user interaction coming into play here. So again, this is tracking first 3 minutes. So we have a small amount of time here. I think this is more or less useful for maybe some intrusion stuff. But in the first screenshot I have here is me opening the Photos application. So I open up my laptop lid. I was looking for a picture of some sort, open up Photos, and I can see that interaction with that. Now, a couple of other examples here. This one's showing user bin open. I use the open command a lot to basically take something from the terminal and maybe open up a database or a p-list to do some forensic analysis of it. So I've actually done this one here where I'm using the open command to open up a software update p-list file to do whatever analysis I need to do with that one. Another one is using the find command. So I'm looking for particular types of files. So I'm looking for anything in my home directory with the path that contains software update. So anything, any files, any databases associated with that file path is something potentially that would be useful there too. So you see, not just a process, but the full path to what could potentially be found on there. So if somebody's on my system and they're looking for some weird stuff, like Etsy password files or the Kerberos stuff that he was just talking about, this would be a nice indicator to look for that kind of thing. Then we got user authentication. So I open up my laptop lid, and maybe I close it. and I don't actually authenticate. Or I could see these user authentication records in here and be like, okay, they actually logged onto the system in some way. And I could use these, I can correlate these with system logs, a couple of other different system logs as well, and try to put that story together. All right, now downloaded files. So this one is interesting. The timestamps for this one are a bit strange, and I'm not quite sure. I've been meaning to ask you about some of those timestamps a little bit later. So these are showing downloaded files, and it's not every single downloaded file. Again, probably more or less the first 3 minutes or so of the particular device being opened up and authenticated to. But this is going to show me, potentially, files that are being synced. So when you open up your laptop for the first time, and it has an internet connection, it wants to sync everything. I have some ICS files here. Let me just click through. I'll show you a bigger one here. I got some ICS files. These are my calendar events. Each one of these is a separate event. They like to be synced across devices. So if you have iCloud turned on, things are syncing all the time. I got a few other things under messages and attachments. So I'm chatting back and forth, maybe on my phone. Once I open up my laptop, it wants to sync and bring down a bunch of GIF files, some picture files. Those will get synced and pushed down to the device. What else do I have here? Mail. Of course, mail wants to sync and pull down different attachments and things. So if I'm looking for maybe malicious attachments, look for those that are going to be stored in there. And we have some more ICS files right at the end. So you get a whole variety of different things, but think how the system works. It's going to be the first 3 minutes, generally speaking, of stuff being synced to it. Next one is block. So block is trying to block things. Imagine that, how well named. So it's basically saying, and it's, I can't really show the screenshot here, that this background task management agent is kind of saying, hey, MicroSnitch wants to create a login helper. So we're talking about persistence points. We've talked about launch agents, daemons, XBC services, login items, all sorts of different persistence points. Block is going to tell me when each of those are attempting to be installed. So certainly I want to get a record of that. Maybe I want to know when they were installed on that system. If logging is enabled, it creates a beautiful log file. It's got timestamps. It shows me that, where is it, the MicroSnitch app wanted to install this this login item, and it shows me whether the user clicked allow or deny. In this case, I clicked allow. I was going to do a little bit of research into that particular application. However, I don't believe logging is turned on by default. Fortunately, it gets logged into the unified log. So in case the user just didn't turn that little checkbox on, that's fine. I get all the unified log versions of that as well. So I kind of get a better historical view. Now, unified logs are not kept around forever, maybe anywhere from 4 to maybe 6 weeks, depending on the usage of the system. But that's a good amount of time to show me historical persistence mechanisms that have been installed on the system. And it's a little bit difficult to see here, but we have things like kernel extensions, launch daemons, and we got the login item from MicroSnitch right at the end there. So it's going to show me who is trying to install this. Is it an installer application? I have bin CP here, trying to install launch daemon for Microsoft Auto Update. I have some kernel extensions that are being installed by SoClose installer. So this is me installing a variety of different antivirus products on my system. And each one of those is going to install usually at least one different launch agent or persistence mechanism. Now, fun fact, when you are running, I don't know, I think I have 5 different AVs on my system right now. That system does not work really well. I have never had my system reboot more a couple weeks or so than when I had all those AV products basically fighting together. So I wouldn't recommend it. Choose one, maybe. Next up, we got the Lulu Firewall. So free firewall. I love that it is free. And I love that it creates an extremely detailed firewall log, lulu.log. So this one's going to keep track of not just the firewall status. Again, I want to know if it's on or off. If I'm noticing a lack of logging, yeah, it's probably off. But it's just going to show me different software installations. What's the user installing? Does the user know that they're installing this? Is somebody else installing it for them? Which user is it under? So I got user 501 here. If I had a 502, 3, 4, and so on. Now I can start figuring out which account is doing the software installations. Where it's installing from, where it came from, some IP addresses, some port information. So this is Hexfiend. Hexfiend is one of my favorite GUI hex forensic analysis tools. I use it all the time. And that one's coming down from GitHub user, content.com. So I can start looking at things that are installed, start seeing where they originated from. Are those malicious IPs? Are they malware host sites? Is it something else that I should potentially take a closer look at? Process information, you also get some signing and some entitlement information that might give you an idea, is this thing malicious or not, depending on which entitlements it's requiring. And then again, we also have a bundle identifier. You're like, oh, okay, bundle identifier. Everything has a bundle identifier. When we're talking about forensic analysis, that bundle identifier is super useful. I will take that and search across the whole system, and it will just pop up everywhere. Different databases, plist files, log files. It is the main identifier for that app. So if it's something that I'm particularly interested in, I can look for that and see what was installed, what user interaction they had with it, did they have it open all the time, look into the knowledge C database to see how often they used a particular app. Was it a one-shot deal? Was it something they used every day? That kind of pattern of life information could also be very, very useful. Now, next one is Oversight. So Oversight is going to keep track of your camera and your microphone, if you're being recorded or not. Most folks would want to know if they're being recorded. Lovely little log file here called oversight.log. So this one is keeping track of which thing is being used. And this, the first two entries here, we're both seeing a FaceTime HD camera, which is the camera front-facing on the laptop lid right here. Now, I, for some reason, always click the FaceTime icon every single time. And of course, if you don't have the little blocker there, you see your double chin face, and you're like, oh gosh, I don't need to see that at all. So each time I did use that one, I clicked block because it's right next to another application that I use all the time. I should just learn and take that off my dock, but I never actually do. But when I do want to use the camera, things like GoToMeeting, maybe I got a presentation that I have to do for SANS or something. They want to see my face. I want to enable the camera so they can see my double chin and all that good stuff in great, glorious detail. So I've clicked allow for that one. So it shows me that user interaction. Is it maybe mistakenly used or was it intentionally used? Next one. So that is it for the Objective-C tools. Thank you, Patrick, for that. Love those forensic artifacts. Next one is Little Snitch. Now, Little Snitch is a big program. There's a lot of stuff going on with it. What I have found with a lot of these applications is that a lot of those databases are encrypted or obfuscated. This was one of them. I was like, oh, that makes me quite sad. That means I don't get the forensic artifacts of all the tracking that it actually does. Well, I could, maybe with a little bit more work, but I'm looking for quick wins in this case. So I'm looking specifically for the network monitor information. So I was able to extract some of the information from that because it is keeping it in a nice plain text log. No decryption, no fancy anything that needs to be shown there. Let me just open this one up a little bit. So this is logging with different versions of Little Snitch you are running, which is nice for versioning. Maybe there's some bugs or something that you need to take a look at, but also network connections, and network connections sometimes by an application, which is quite useful. So I might peruse this list and see if anything looks malicious, looks weird. As far as I know, these are all clean, as far as I know. But things like looking for Safari, it's going to Squarespace, it's going to Dropbox. Okay, that makes perfect sense. But maybe I followed a malicious Dropbox link or something like that and unintentionally installed some software that I didn't want to. So I can always use these for different kind of pivot points. I'm looking here, I want to look for more malicious factors a little bit later on. Now SoClose. So I chose SoClose. Again, I installed 5-ish different ones. A lot of them were sponsors. I basically looked at all the different AV companies that were either attending or speaking or sponsoring this conference, and I installed all of them. Again, wouldn't recommend it. Some applications are better at logging than others. Some of them are better at logging encrypted versus unencrypted. So every app is going to be different. You just don't know until you take a look at it. So I chose one, and SoClose was the lucky winner of this one. So SoClose likes to store a lot of its events in simply a SQLite database called events.db. I like that. SQLite databases, they're great for analysis. You open it up, there's a bunch of tables, some could potentially be more useful than others. So this one is pretty much keeping track of what's being found on the system, what's being quarantined, what's being flagged as a potential problem. So I got my little query here, and Z detection path is keeping track of where this particular malicious file was. And this is useful for me. I don't care if it's cleaned up or actually infected the device, but it might show me where files actually were. So maybe if I'm looking for a mail attack that was sent months ago, it might be gone now, it might be cleaned up, but I still have record of a lot of that within these log files. So I will look for historic evidence in some cases. Other things here, downloads directory, that's going to be an easily targeted directory looking for malware. Only because users like to click things, and where does it go by default? Generally to the downloads directory. So that's a nice quick one right there. So we got an example of Lazarus. And then we have things like volumes. So things that are plugged in, SoClose in this particular case, wants to scan everything on that volume. That's great, it wants to protect me. So this volume, this was for our deeper networks. This is a SANS kind of gamification forensic analysis. We have a lot of tools on there. You can see it's picking out some Windows-specific tools and saying, yep, that's not something that you want on your system there. But what this shows me is that thumb drive of potential investigative use. So if that's something I'm curious and want to see, I might do a keyword search for D4 net wars across the whole system and see how often it's been plugged in and used on that particular device. And for the record, all this is known malware on my system. Yes, I keep a lot of malware on my system, for fun. All right, next one, network connections. So a library logs directory. You're going to have these SoClose diagnostic some number.gz logs. They roll over those logs and archive them quite a bit. So you actually get a pretty decent historical view of a lot of stuff that SoClose is logging. One of those is network connections, just to zoom in there a little bit. Network connections, that's very useful. Now this is keeping track of all network connections, not just browser requests, not just users browsing and doing whatever, but also applications and what access they want for that. So I see user and I see system level stuff in here. So just as an example, again, Arrow AV, another AV that I have installed in my system. I can't wait to install most of these, to be perfectly honest with you, to keep my system from rebooting right now. So I got united.com. So the timestamps for this one were on the previous slide, but this was me basically checking flights for this trip. So I'm on united.com, I'm looking at my seat, I'm seeing if I got an upgrade or anything like that. Then I got some other stuff going on in the background. So Bajango here, this is iStat menus. So all in the meantime, iStat menus, it's doing some sort of communication. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but hopefully it's purely legit. iCloud.com. That's going to be something that you're probably going to find pretty frequently on Mac devices. So I didn't go explicitly to iCloud.com, but I have everything syncing all the time. So it's going to constantly ping out to this gateway.icloud.com area. And we got some SoClose stuff going on there. Probably sending all my data back. That's cool. What else we got? iTunes. So at the time that I was doing my flight stuff, I was also playing a playlist. I was using Apple Music to play one of my class playlists while the students were doing some work. So you will see the play.itunes.apple.com. Now just knowing what's normal, what's not is going to be quite useful to figure out, is this user browsing activity or is this maybe the applications doing some stuff? So this one is definitely the application. So after United, I went to v2.0.com to look for different tours. So I spent the last few days before coming out here to go to Nice. I wanted to potentially go on a wine tour or something like that. So I was doing some research there. Now, of course, I can correlate all this with things like the browser history, Safari, Chrome, whatever. These are not the only places I'm going to find evidence of this type. But the thing that I really like is having multiple sources of this data. So I can go clear my browsing history. It's very, very easy to do. Users will love to do that as an anti-forensics procedure, but they don't necessarily know that it's being recorded in other places. So if it's being corrupted or wiped or removed or just overwritten, maybe it's timed out or something like that, I want to have a backup source or some way to corroborate all the different types of things going on there, which is where the third-party app stuff is very, very useful. Now it also stores specific web visits. So before it was just any network connection. This one is specifically browsing information. So I filtered this one down. I was looking up Marriott. So I was looking up this hotel that we're staying in right now. I wanted to get all the details. I wanted to try to get a good room. I want to see what restaurants they have, how expensive the food is, the beach party that we're rocking out to right now. You know, I want to find all of that information. So this is me basically going to Marriott, looking at the hotel, and it's caching a lot of the different files that are being downloaded on there. You see some Edge Suite stuff in here. We go over here, we see some of the JPEGs, the pictures. I think there's a WAF file for some font information in there. So you can see all the different files that are being stored on there. This could be potentially useful in a drive-by download. If it's got some weird file that drops down doing whatever exploit that it's going to do, that could be very useful to be able to see every little bit and bob that's in there. It may not necessarily be cached on the device. And this one. So this one is different processes, and I'm going to zoom in again. I know it's quite hard to see. I see a lot of log files. I feel like I'm doing it blind a little bit earlier than some people by looking at some of this data. But we're looking at some process information here. So this one's an example of me opening up the terminal application. So applications, utilities, terminal, just opening that up, and then all this other stuff follows. So it's amazing how much stuff actually happens when you do something as simple as opening up one application. So it's showing user bin login, bash, some makedir, some Anaconda stuff, some data analytics, some uname stuff, all sorts of different things go on. So seeing that interaction, all the different processes being spawned is quite useful. You also see some of the bundle IDs, which is again something that I'm going to look up. Is it signed? Is it truly Apple? Is it something that's not signed by Apple? Maybe take a closer look at that. And then finally, for the last app, iStat menus. So I don't know if you saw before, but I have a boatload of little icons right at the top there. Half of them are AV, the other half are iStat menus. So we got a system monitor here. Now this one is certainly keeping track of system level stuff. First thing we're talking about is sleep and shutdown status. Yeah, okay, sleep shutdowns, not super interesting, but this shows me when the user was potentially active. I want to know when they are hands on keyboard in front of it doing stuff, or if it's just idle, if it's sleeping, if it's doing its own thing. So on the left-hand side, we got this sleep table within this uptime database, and it's keeping track of when it's sleeping. There's a start and there's an end, and I did the calculation to figure out how long it's sleeping for, so I could get a good idea of when the system was in use. On the right-hand side, same kind of thing. I'm in the uptime table. It's keeping track of uptime. So boots and shutdowns, those are going to be potentially significant too. Again, I can pull a lot of the same information from the unified logs, but again, it may not necessarily stick around. So it could be corrupted. I've had plenty of corrupted log files in the past. And this one, so this is the bandwidth database. We're going to keep track of a lot of network type of information here. So this one's showing different network usage. And so I have this, it's not the most complex SQL query, but I am pulling together, 3 different tables here to correlate this information. So I got starts, I got ends, I got the specific interface in play, and I have the name of the access point that I'm connected to. What you're seeing right here is basically sampling of me sitting in Zurich Airport waiting to fly to Nice. So, when in Zurich, finish the presentation, basically is what happened. And then you see right after, I finally get to my hotel, and I connect to the Wi-Fi there, a poor hotel's guest. So it will show you potentially location. Now, conveniently enough, they store the BSS ID there. I can take that, I can throw that into things like Wiggle, and get the actual location. You know, is that the Accor hotels in Nice, or is it in Monaco, or is it, you know, somewhere else? Now I can get a little bit more specific if that's what I'm looking for. And then we have upload and download. So it's showing me how much traffic has been being pushed in and out of the device at that time. If I'm looking for things like exfiltration over the network, and I see it pegged up a little bit higher than maybe the normal activity, that's going to show me potentially some access to that. So quite useful. Next up, sleeps and wakes. Again, you know, different logs will log this in different ways. So they have the database. Now we have just the iStat menu daemon.log. So this one's just keeping track of things like restarts. So whenever the system restarts, it starts doing this padding, right? Yeah, padding and then padding and preparing. Good spelling right there. I didn't notice that one before. But things like the SMC, the network, whatever else, those log entries will start upon restart of the system. And then we have the sleeps and the wakes, and we get some time information associated with that. So it's going to show it to me in a fairly good historical manner, all that kind of information. And then we have power status. So whether or not the system is plugged in or not. So mobile devices, they're mobile. Not plugged in right now, so I am in unplugged status. This is going to show me potentially as the user on the move, or they tethered to some sort of power source. So I use this one for iOS quite a lot. Same thing for Mac devices. I want to know what is the power status of this. You know, I've had some folks basically say their device was dead at a given point in time. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to look at the time in question and see, was this plugged in or not? Are they lying to me or not? Now, a lot of the different stuff stored for iStats is keep track into a variety of different tables, sorted by hour, day, week, and month. So it's basically giving statistics for all of that information, meaning it's storing the data for all that information. So we do have about a month's worth max for a lot of that type of data. Then we got disk status. This one I really like. You're like, ooh, disk status. Yeah, it doesn't seem that interesting. But this is going to show me if devices have been plugged into the system. I don't know what devices. I'm going to have to do additional analysis. But the two that are highlighted here are two thumb drives that I've connected. It doesn't show me the volume name, but this B14 GUIDs here kind of scattered throughout. This is my home system. This is the internal drive of my system. That's basically the volume UUID of my internal drive. Then I get these two other ones, and they're two different devices. We have size, used space, and free space. Now I can see how big was the thumb drive that I plugged in. And these are two 64 gig thumb drives. They're both two different 64 gig thumb drives. I can also look at how much of that drive is used if I look at the space in there. So useful for things like exfil. Was a thumb drive plugged in that was completely empty, and then maybe all of a sudden you saw a bunch of files being moved over, things like that. Could be potentially of investigative use. And then we have the weather. I do like the weather one. So I do pay the extra couple dollars, I think, for the weather service because I want to know if it's going to be sunny. You know, I don't get to see the outside very much, more so this past week than any week before. So go up to the weather there. It's going to show me what the local weather is. It's automatically looking for wherever I am. It's basically, you know, querying what location I'm currently at. And it's keeping track of this for whatever reason, but I'm very happy that it keeps track of this. Getting user location and fairly accurate user location is not the easiest thing. It's useful on iOS devices, but on macOS, not a lot of stuff is being stored in a readable format. So this one, you see it's fetching weather for location, and then we get some coordinates here. Now, these coordinates are being saved as longitude and latitude. You got to flip them around a little bit there. Most of the times you see coordinates, latitude, longitude, you just have to know where they are. If you just made the assumption that we're at 7.4 and 43, it's going to end up in the Indian Ocean or something like that, when in fact we are right here. So took those, mapped them in there, threw that into Google Maps, and it is this hotel. It's me basically sitting out there finishing this presentation. Does anybody notice anything about the coordinates here and the hotel? What's the name of the bar? Yeah, I was like, perfect. That makes the best screenshot. So we get the 7 degrees, that bar is literally right out there right now. So that's it for my presentation. Basically, I want to look at different types of log data. I want to look at specifically third-party data. It's not investigated as much as a lot of the internals and the native stuff is researched. But I'm looking for different pivot points, maybe for criminal activity, maybe for malware intrusion type of activity. I want to know, where was the user? How many volumes did they have access to? How much data was stored in said volumes? Did they download anything? Did they know it was malicious? Did they install it anyway? I don't know how many different intrusion cases I've just looked at the AV logs or crash logs and found the malware, and they're just like, yep, I saw that. I didn't know what it meant though. I'm like, but why did you keep installing it? Why didn't you remove it from your system? It makes my job a little bit easier as an analyst, but that's something that is also logged into the system. So you can certainly find me on Twitter. I have my DMs open, so feel free to say hi. My blog and presentations, as well as most of my forensic research, is already out there on my Mac Forensics blog. And if you'd like to take a class and kind of get into some in-depth forensic stuff, and I make everybody use a command line in class, and I have no apologies with that, it's not just a Mac class, it's a Mac class. We get really in-depth in there. You can find out more information on the forensics518.com website. So don't want to take up much more of your time. I think I've run over a little bit. But thank you for coming out, and I'll be at the party later on tonight.